months, we're finally in a position to present to you the final round of the WMSC 3 World Tour from Suzuka. That's right, round 6 of the championship is now on YouTube. And despite the fact that the Drivers' Championship has already been decided, there is a bit of a twist for this race at one of the most legendary racing venues in the world. What do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look at that in the WMSC 3 World Tour news section. Remember when I told you last time that Mistral was theoretically still in a position to win the team's championship? Well, seemingly they're in a position where they might actually clinch that championship now, because Lorenzo Turi has announced on the RSL Discord server that for the final round of the championship, he's going to be supported by 2 of his sim racing buddies. Now, while one of them wouldn't be in a position to actually race at the event, Arturo Smaglia would end up racing for Mistral and therefore be in a position to help Turi out, potentially winning the championship for Mistral. Of course, we asked Mr. Turi whether that was a specific maneuver to clinch said championship.
I swear I didn't. Arturo and Christian are mates of mine since the very beginnings of my sim racing endeavor. We're really good friends in real life as well. And I asked them if I wanted to make it to this race as a one-off to race together before the end of the year. But then the team's championship standings were posted, and I realized that we're still in contention for the team's title. It's obviously far-fetched because Kostek had a really good season as well, and they're way ahead, but never say never. It's gonna be interesting, at least for the final race.
Also, Krzysztof Ciesilski and Sofia Mertens are gonna make their respective debuts in the Online Racing Super League. While Ciesilski is gonna race with Agatino Bivona and Juho Czekosopanen for the Meriblau team, Sofia Mertens is gonna jump into one of the 3 Team RSL cars, joined by Pedro de Sousa, which has made me realize that maybe for next season we should actually use different colors for different Team RSL cars. Otherwise, I might struggle to differentiate between drivers when I'm watching midfield fights and Anyway, let's have a look at the pole position lap. And once again, it's our WMSC 3 World Tour champion, Lorenzo Turi, the man with the number 19 on his car as well as his helmet, into T1. Infamous for some, let's say, interesting collisions in early 90s Grand Prix racing, into T2, carrying the momentum, touch the curb, and then into the world-famous S's section. Now, this is what you'll usually see if you watch a broadcast of any racing at the Suzuka circuit, whether it be Grand Prix racing or other forms of open wheel racing or GT racing. But then this is where the twist comes in. Brake into a right-hander, tight line, hold the apex back on the main straight. Brilliant lap by Lorenzo Turi. He is on pole position for the final race of the season. Let's have a look at the rest of the starting grid. So, Lorenzo Turi ahead of Max Heyman, Arturo Smaglia in a great 3rd place ahead of Josh Flynn, Daniel Bentenrieder in 5th ahead of Aaron Curtis, Seifert, Bivona, Simon Core, and Hugh Hamill rounding out the top 10. Throughout the race, I'll keep you up to date on whether Mistral or Kostek is going to leave Suzuka with the team's championship. Adam Rosinko in 11th place ahead of Juho Czekosopanen in 12th place. And as we turn to page 2, you'll see that there will be a few drivers who don't have times listed because while Mr. Ciesilski wasn't able to participate in qualifying, Lucas Hamilton was actually banned from qualifying for punting Aaron Curtis out of the race at Adelaide. Therefore, no time for Lucas nor Ciesilski. Wittmann in 13th ahead of Giovanni Philippe. Christian Pomilla wouldn't be able to start the race despite qualifying in 15th. Behind him, Sofia Mertens and Pedro de Sousa. And with that out of the way, let's get to the start of the final race of the WMSC 3 World Tour. So then, final round of the WMSC 3 World Tour. Turi to your right, Heyman to your left, front row of the grid. 5 red lights at the final round of the championship at Suzuka. And we're off. Great start from Turi as well as Heyman. Bentenrieder already ahead of Smaglia. Flynn next to him. Curtis behind him. Everybody following through. There's this car spinning in the background. I think that's Agatino Bivona, though. Everybody else through T1 and T2. Heyman ahead of Bentenrieder now. Flynn in 4th. I think that's Roy Seifert behind them in 5th. Great start from Lorenzo Turi, still in the lead. Look at the midfield fights with Core, and I think that might be one of the Team RSL cars. We can already see a car in the background. I think that's Giovanni Philippe without a front wing now through the S's. That famous section. And then into the final chicane for the short circuit. Curtis, Core, A Timur Russell car, Vipman. Yuacheko Sopanen into lap 2. And we're going to have a look at the replay in just a second. Turi still in the lead ahead of the two Kostek boys. Now, I can already tell you this way, Mistral wouldn't win the Constructors or the team's championship, as we see Mark Wittmann fighting for P9. He is now ahead of one of the RSL cars. Difficult to differentiate them, seeing as all three of them are green. They're not differentiated as they were for the last race at Adelaide, but Wittmann is now in 9th place for Streamline. Let's have a look at the replay. Great start from Turi, as I mentioned. Not such a good start from Smuglia. Curtis behind with a good start. Core, I think, with a solid start, as we see Agatino Bivona spinning. We see Core with a solid start rolling down the hill. Maybe a tad bit too early, but I digress. As we see Core bumping with Bivona, who's spinning behind him, colliding with Giovanni Philippe, and therefore Philippe is losing his front wing. Most people are able to avoid Bivona, but not all of them, and that includes Giovanni Philippe, who had to retire from the race. Turi still in the lead ahead of Max Heyman. Danya Bentenrieder in 3rd. Josh Flynn in 4th. Solid performance this season from Flynn. Same goes for Seifert in 5th place. Arturo Smuglia, solid start for him so far in 6th, though. This way, Mistral will not win the team's championship. And Aaron Curtis once again in a solid 7th place behind that group. Core in 8th place racing for C2F Racing. Again, that is me, the admin, or one of the admins for the online racing Super League Racing for C2F Racing, though Adrian Friedrich obviously announced that he has retired from road course racing, at least for the time being. Whereas Gwendolyn Cole hasn't been around for a couple of races, as we see Yuacheko Sopanen in 13th position behind Silski, I suppose, as he goes into the gravel. Reminds me a bit of that crash Juan Pablo Montoya had in 2005 as he gets bumped by one of the Team ORSL cars. Maybe giving Sopanen a bit of a bump down the straight if you went by the stock car logic of racing, but I digress. Sopanen still not in the points. Been a tough ride so far for him this season, especially in Adelaide, as we pointed out, with him colliding with his teammate, as we see Smuglia fighting with Roy Seifert for 5th place. Smuglia trying to go down the inside of Roy Seifert, who's impressed this year, definitely. And I think he's got a bright future ahead if he keeps going, if he keeps with the right people around him. And one thing I'd like to point out is that Back Row Motorsports has performed quite well so far in the team's championship, despite the fact that they really considered themselves backmarkers all in all, as we see Seifert going off again, very reminiscent of what Montoya did in 2005, or what happened to Timo Glock in 2009 at that exact corner. He's now fallen back quite a few places, as we see his teammate, Lucas Hamilton, almost repeating that same mistake, though bumping into the barrier. Losing his front wing, therefore he has to pit, as we see Danya Bentenrieder, who's still in a podium position, going off the track into the grass. Josh Flynn says thank you very much. Bentenrieder now in 4th. Another small mistake from the man who could have won this year's WMSC 3 World Tour. He definitely had the pace to compete, but he just did not have the consistency, and it shows once again as we see Smuglia, Curtis, Hamilton, who's about to be lapped by Core. Behind him, Roy Seifert, his teammate. And a couple of laps later, Seifert will be at the rear end of Mr. Core, trying to overtake the man with the number 2 on his car. Trying to go down the inside. Core almost doing a Schumacher 2010 if we're going with the references today. If you remember that duel between Barrichello and Michael Schumacher at Hungary. And let's just say that Alexander Knezovic wasn't particularly impressed with that move by yours truly. Possibly reminiscent of that, or possibly reminded of that maneuver as well, as we see Roy Seifert drifting through the S's again. He's definitely quick. He's got all the tools to be, a front runner in the future, as we see his teammate go off once again, losing his rear wing, and that will be the first safety car of the day. I can already tell you that. A very chaotic race from that standpoint, though. There weren't many overtakes. There weren't many collisions, if you may, but if you screw up at this circuit, a safety car is imminent. And as we see Danya Bentenrieder already into the pits, and essentially everybody would pit as we see the standings for the safety car restart. Lorenzo Turi ahead of Max Heyman, Josh Flynn in third, Benton Reeder, Smuglia, Seifert, Curtis, Wittmann, Ryzunko, and Simon Core rounding out the top 10 for the safety car restart. And of course, the question now is, how aggressive is Lorenzo Turi going to be competing with Max Heyman, seeing as it looks like Mistral isn't really in a position to win the team's championship? How aggressive is Smuglia going to be? 10 minutes to go at the final round of the championship as we see a Team ORSL car in the back trying to catch up to the queue. Great restart from Turi, though. Heyman is trying to get the slipstream, both in the T1. Heyman on the outside, doesn't manage to overtake Turi. Flynn behind him, then Benton Reeder. Seifert fighting with Smuglia. Curtis behind him. I think there's a Streamline car involved as well. Everybody going through the S's once again. Curtis Wittmann now ahead of Ryzunko and Core, who seemingly had a terrible restart. Hugh Hamill behind him. Once again, going through that final section. Incredibly difficult with these cars, especially the braking aspect, as we see Hamill fighting with Juho Sopanen going into the final turn. Down the start from the straight once again, and there's already a bit of a gap between Max Heyman and Lorenzo Turi. Behind him, Josh Flynn, Daniel Benton Reeder, as we see Wittmann fighting with Adam Ryzunko for position. Behind Aaron Curtis, behind the two of them, Simon Core, as Ryzunko almost loses it. Loses a position to Core as well as possibly to Hugh Hammer, though he's able to defend. Core now ahead of Adam Ryzunko. Midfield fights. Definitely one aspect that has shaped the WMSC 3 World Tour over this entire season. People with potentially less experience than the front runners trying to fight amongst each other, seeing who's the better racer on that day. As we see Simon Core now in the slipstream of Mark Wittmann trying to overtake the Streamline driver. Possibly taking a page out of the book that Roy Seifert had utilized earlier. As we see Ryzunko defending against Hugh Hamill. Duel between the two, and Core is now ahead of Adam Ryzunko behind Aaron Curtis. As we see, I think that's Roy Seifert now defending against Aaron Curtis. Lots of dirt being dusted up. Going through those world-famous corners as Lorenzo Turi is still in the lead. Of course, he wants to crown this season with a victory as we see Arturo Smuglia fighting with Dania Benton Reeder for 4th position. Smuglia, again, he is in a position where he was brought in not specifically to help the team in the team's championship, because Turi hadn't remembered that that was still an option, as Dania Benton Reeder makes another mistake, therefore letting Arturo Smuglia through. He says, thank you very much. He's now made up 1 place, though he makes a small mistake, repeats the mistake that Daniel Benton Reeder had made earlier, funnily enough. Benton Reeder's through once again, as well as Seifert. Smuglia maybe not used to the cars as he gets almost taken out by Aaron Curtis, bumps into Mark Wittmann, loses loads of positions. With 4 minutes to go, that's an absolutely bizarre incident as he collides with Aaron Curtis once again, and I can already tell you that's the 2nd safety car of the day. Let's see what happens. Smuglia with a bit of oversteer there. Seifert manages to go through. Smuglia on the grass as we see Aaron Curtis almost taking him out there already. Smuglia bumping into Wittmann, who's lucky to not lose his front wing there. Curtis, of course, having lost their rear wing, I suppose. There we go. Therefore colliding into Smuglia, causing the 2nd safety car of the day. And as we see here from the perspective of viewers truly, it seems as if there were a few connection issues for Aaron Curtis that day. Therefore, the C2F driver bumping into Curtis, possibly contributing to this rather odd situation for the final restart of the day. And again, it's going to be a question of who can manage the restart the best, because there are going to be no more pit stops. It's essentially going to be a 1-lap sprint to the finish. That's right, Alexander Knezovic, the race director, made the call. It will be a 1-lap sprint to the finish. Incredibly exciting, incredibly exhausting, and therefore, hopefully, incredibly entertaining for you, the audience, as we have a look at the standings ahead of the final safety car restart for the day. I can already assure you that final restart of the WMSC 3 World Tour, a bit of a checkup there. And there's a collision in the background with a Team ORSL car. I think that was Sophia Mertens, Lorenzo Turi with another restart. I think Core was involved as well. Heyman now in 2nd, Benton Reeder, Flynn, Seifert in 5th, Wittmann in 6th, Turi again solid restart. Heyman in second, the two Kostek boys, they've essentially clinched the championship at this point. They are the team's champions for the WMSC 3 World Tour. What has happened there in the background, we're going to have a look at that in just a second. Once again, the midfield fighting amongst each other, trying their damnedest to get another few points for the final round of the championship, as we see Wittmann, Hamill, and Core possibly fighting to the finish. Lorenzo Turi wins the final race at Suzuka. He is deserving of the WMSC 3 World Tour crown, and Kostek have deservingly won the team's championship. But let's have a look at that bizarre restart. Some people might be reminded of Mugello 2020 to get another Grand Prix racing reference in there, but this man has somewhat dominated the championship, always a cut above the rest. Lorenzo Turi, your WMSC 3 World Tour champion. Absolutely incredible performance throughout the entire season, and I'm incredibly excited to see what he can do next year in the WMSC, the Grand Prix Racing Championship in the iBoss realm. Is he a contender, possibly, for the championship? We'll have to wait and see for that until March. But let's have a look at what happened at the restart for the final restart of the Suzuka race. So here's another angle on the final restart, and I'd ask you all to make up your own mind as to what happened. I mean, obviously, it's just a Constantina effect, and therefore multiple people were involved, but a bit difficult to actually make out who's responsible for what in this specific instance. But either way, Lorenzo Turi manages to win the final round of the championship. Fastest lap of the race for him as well. Absolutely deserving, as I said before, of the WMSC 3 World Tour crown. He wins the championship with 50 points, 20 points ahead of Max Heyman. Danya Bentenreiter finishes the season in third place. Behind him, Flynn, Core, Seifert, Peckley, Kronsky, Kassar, and Aaron Curtis rounding out the top 10. Funnily enough, both Kronsky and Kassar only scored when they won their respective races at Johannesburg and Adelaide. And as we have a look at the final team standings, Kostek wins the team's championship ahead of Mistral 58-50. Backrail Motorsports all of a sudden finishes in third place, a fantastic result for Backrail, ahead of C2F Racing with 21 points. Bravo Snow Schutten ahead of SCMM, Klepek, Turismo, Lightning, and Streamline rounding out the top 10 in the standings. And yes, we will hear from Lorenzo Turi in future videos, as well as having another look at Josh Kassar's wonderful win at Adelaide, which Ash Baker from the outside line is going to do a two-parter about, so I highly recommend you check that out once the videos are released on his channel. But for now, thank you for watching, thank you for participating, thank you for engaging with us for another thrilling season in the ORSL. And until next time, stay safe and keep racing.